Hey, it's Dawn Nicole here, and recently I was invited by PMI Minnesota, one of the biggest chapters, by the way, in the US, to talk about the impacts of AI on Agile and the impacts of AI on project management. And I kind of talked about why it's time for the Agile purist to let that purist mindset go, right? And I also talked about how we as Agilists, if you want to use that term, are some of the least agile people, right? By virtue of the values, we're supposed to inspect and adapt, responding to change and all of this, but we're not that quick to do it. We are so quick to defend a discipline that was really put together back in 2001. And I talk about how the world has changed and how, whether we like it or not, AI is going to play a big role. So check out this presentation. I drop a lot of nuggets and I hope you enjoy it. Talk to you later. Let me know what you think in the comments. Take care. Today I'm going to focus on change, right? I'm going to talk about agile change and what that means today and why that's necessary, and more important, helping you understand what transformation looks like today in 2023. Let me take you back. By now, all of us on today's call, most of us are familiar with where it all happened, the magic in the room, right? The documented 2001 Utah snowbird ski resort. So in case you're not familiar, I'll be very quick here. So as you know, software developers from all around the world came together in February 2001 to solve what they felt was a problem. Building software development projects and software development at that time was taking far too long. It cost too much, it was taking too long, and there were too many risks associated with it. So you had leaders from all around the world come together in this room to really figure out, what can we do? How can we utilize a more agile approach? Now, what's really interesting about this picture, and I won't harp on it, is you always see all the men in the picture, but there were women in the room. I just want to say, right? So there were women in the room if you look at the other picture here. What's really interesting, folks, is that the discussions were a means to figure out there's got to be a simpler, better, faster solution. And the outcome of that weekend would be the 4 values and 12 principles that would later become known as the Agile Manifesto. So I just like to preface with where it kind of started in the room. Now, later what would happen is these 2 gentlemen at the bottom, Ken Schwaber and Jeff Sutherland, would then, from this meeting, go on to create the Scrum Guide, right? And the Scrum methodology sort of morphed, and I'm sure Jeff and Mike know more about this as well. But that's what's really interesting, and that's what happened. Now I'm going to take you down a different path. What's interesting is that that's really where Agile, as we know it in its formal discipline and a methodology, sort of started, right? Manifesto and then the Scrum Guide. But what's really interesting is it's morphed. It's changed, just like we just identified, right? And some of the most significant changes that have occurred in the Agile methodology over time are, number 1, scaling. This notion of scaling. I have news for you. When they were in that room at the time in 2001, the idea was that we would kind of start one team at a time. So in that room that day, they weren't necessarily building a model at scale. But what would happen is we're now 20 plus years later, and scaling sort of have come from that, right? As companies would look at, well, this worked with 1 team and this works with 2 teams. Why can't we try it with 10 teams at a time, right? Why can't we try it with multiple organizations? And so you have this notion of scaling. And so sort of the birth of this would come safe, right? Scaled agility and things like large Scrum at scale and Nexus and so on and so forth. But here's what's really interesting, because I study this market quite a bit. The second market that came from this that no one saw in that room that day is this notion of enterprise agile transformation. Did you know that as a result of scaled agility came a whole business model that today is a multi-billion-dollar model that's called enterprise agile transformation? And when you think about it, you almost had to create this business model, right? Because if you're going to scale the organization, that means that one change impacts another, and you have to create space for this agile adoption at scale, right? So this gave way to a multi-billion-dollar industry, and look it up, it literally is multi-billions of dollars that in the room that day they couldn't have foreseen. But here's what else have changed, right? When Agile first came about in that room, it was all about software development. It was all about tech. But today, Agile has really evolved and morphed, and we're seeing this used in HR. We're seeing this used in learning and development, marketing, pharmaceutical.
So non-tech companies, nonprofits, and I do another talk where I talk about all these use cases like a winery, right? A nonprofit, a toy store, Disney World. All of these non-tech organizations and models are now utilizing bits and pieces of Agile, so much so that there's now a new framework that's called Agile Marketing and Agile HR. Look it up. The other thing that's happening is what I heard you all say earlier, this whole hybrid approach, right? Where companies are starting to say, I don't want the whole thing at scale. I want a little Agile. You want a lot of Agile, you want a little Agile, right? Do I want to start small? Or do I want to do Agile at all? I had one company hire me because they only wanted to be an Agile mindset culture. So the person who put in the chat this whole Agile versus Agile mindset, I will tell you, there are companies that spend and invest an entire year of preparing, and they do the Agile mindset work up front, and then they eventually move to Agile. But here's what's really interesting. Not that Agile has changed, but our reaction to the change. Now, I want us to stop and think about this for a second, because this entire theme of the day is about being Agile, yet Agilists are some of the most non-Agile people. We don't seem to like change. We don't like the idea that our guarded, disciplined, Agile practices are morphing. We fight all the time. But I want you to reflect on something for a second. Let me take you back to 2001. Let's look back and let me show you how the world has changed. You see, if we morphed back to 2001, in 2001, this guy was still on TV. Harry Potter was still a must-see, right? Oh, and guess what? Blockbuster was still the thing to do on Friday night. And guess who was dating? Britney Spears and Justin Timberlake, right? And 7% of business was conducted online. Big change. Oh, and look at this guy. Enron was still alive and well. They hadn't crashed the market yet. And not to be dark, but the Twin Towers were still standing in February of 2001. Think about it. The entire world has changed. Why wouldn't Agile change? Why wouldn't it evolve? Why wouldn't it morph to meet the growing needs of the world around us? When you think about it, it's kind of an oxymoronic notion that Agile should never evolve to meet the needs of the world. And rather than embrace this eventual evolution, Agilists start fighting amongst each other, right? They turn to infighting over, this is the right method, this is the wrong method, don't do it like this. There's more fighting in the Agile community than any other discipline I've ever seen. I just want us to think about this, because I want us to be ethical and I want us to be integrable and respect each other, but there's a lot of fighting. So I'm here to tell you, in 2023, my friends, you don't get points anymore by going by the book. You get points by producing outcomes that matter, thinking critically through complex decisions, and rapidly responding to change, Agilists and project managers, and all those certifications that you run to get, which are great, and all the methodologies that you know. The real question is, do they equal outcomes? The client isn't paying you for your certifications. They're paying you for the outcomes you can cause and create. That's the question. So if it takes you to use Lean, Kanban, Scrum, right, SAFe, BPO, business process, right, and more in order to get a result, then I really respect Michael saying earlier that we do what's needed to satisfy the needs of the company. It's really about meeting the company where they are. If they're not there yet, let's let them do what works for them. We spend so much time fighting, right? But again, as I mentioned, Agilists are some of the least Agile people. We've got to remember how to be Agile again. We've got to recognize that the world around us is changing. Not every company is on the same level, right? They're not at the same place of maturity. Their business models are different. And I'm here to tell you, I've been doing this personally for a very long time. I've run into some models in the back of the warehouse where they're not necessarily ideal for Agile, but they were great for Kanban. So part of understanding the methodology, you all, is understanding when and how to use it for the right purpose. It's not a one-size-fits-all. And we also shouldn't make it archaic where it has to look like what it looked like in 2001. Remember, the 4 principles alone that came out of that day tell us that it's all about individuals and interactions. What happened to that? The world is changing, right? Our social climate is changing. Are we responding? It's also about, it says working software, but I'm going to say working experiences, right? Because the world is changing. It's also about customer collaboration. Are we collaborating with customers in today's time? You do realize that buying behaviors have changed, market trends have changed, the way we buy, the way we research, the way we produce data at alarming rates. The world is changing around us, which also brings us to our fourth value, responding to change. My friends, this means that it would behoove us to understand Agile in a new world, which is what I'm going to talk about today. And for anyone listening to my voice who absolutely refutes this and says, Dawn Nicole doesn't know what she's talking about, I'm living this. And I will remind you that every major doctrine and discipline in law that has ever been presented in history has been updated or changed at some point to align with the growing needs and new information of the world around them. In fact, Newton's law has changed a number of times. Why wouldn't Agile evolve and morph? So the concept here is, how do we understand what it was and what it needs to be for, right? How do we really understand and get our arms around it? Because 2023 is arguably the year of the AI revolution. It is here. We're no longer planning for it. We're no longer waiting for it. Agilists who can hear my voice and project managers, we are smack dab in the middle. No matter where you look, no matter your industry, your sector, the size and scale of the company you work for, AI is all around us, from the banking industry to our customer experience when you first call and an AI is triaging your call and listening for voice recognition, to the school systems who are using chatbots to produce engagement in the classrooms, or what Skilldora does, AI digital avatars to teach courses. And what about aviation, right? Facial recognition at the airport to make sure you are who you say you are, or ensuring that the planes can fly and not be damaged by turbulence, right? AI. It's in our offices, it's in our pharmaceuticals, it's in our supermarket. We can't escape it. So it is time to understand it. And more importantly, Agilists, understand how our skills in Agile can be leveraged to really be on the front lines of AI, which is what I'm going to talk about today, which is what happened for myself and for so many other Agilists. But let's look back at what spawned out of nowhere this big change in AI. Well, thanks to ChatGPT, right? And in case you've been living under a rock, ChatGPT stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer. It is a natural language processing tool, which is a component of AI. I'm not going to give you a deep dive today, but I want you to have enough information. Let me just give you a quick fun fact. Let me share how big this is. Regardless of what side of the fence you are on, whether you are for AI or against AI, we can't deny that in 2023, ChatGPT single-handedly turned the conversation on its head. It helped us to identify what's new, trending, and changing when it comes to artificial intelligence. And my friends, I'm here to tell you that the world is now ready. The world is listening. And by the way, at Skilldora, we're grateful because we were already in the space. So my point is that now that ChatGPT really opened up the floodgates to AI, right? I want you to know, as Agile professionals, we are in the best position to lead the new movement. I'm going to say it again. I'm going to say it slow because I want you to really understand how your Agile skills are transferable and you will be on the front lines of change. So the right question to ask today is, what does Agile look like then in today's world? And how can Agile Scrum Masters and product owners leverage these skills toward enterprise AI adoption? Before I answer that, I have to warn you that AI will not only change the way we work, it will change the types of projects that we work on in the next 6 to 12 months. So if you're a project manager on this call, I want you to be warned that there are some projects that you are tracking forward that will probably pivot because AI adoption is sort of the new move. It's the new wave, and you will see a change in the projects that even you are working on. In fact, let's take a look on the next screen at some of the AI adoption types of needs that major corporations will be leaning in and looking for your help with. So remember, they are trying to navigate this new space. Many of them don't know much more than you. They're going to be looking to hire. They're going to be looking to lean in on your expertise, right? And right now, not tomorrow, not 30 days, right now, companies are in the back of the house having these conversations. And if you don't have this skill set, you might not be privy to it. So let me open up the light here, okay? So number one, AI adoption. That's a word you want to get familiar with. Remember, last year we were talking about Agile adoption, and Agile transformation, you're getting ready to hear a terminology that's called AI enterprise adoption. And this is the notion that an enterprise would look end to end and say, okay, we recognize that artificial intelligence will help us to work smarter, better, faster. In some cases, where do we start? Do we start with customer service? Do we start with accounting? Do we start at large? Do we start small? And they're going to be leaning into you, project managers and agilists, to help them make these critical thinking decisions. But it doesn't stop there. Once they identify and build a heat map, right, or a plan around where they're going to start across the enterprise, they then have to make a second decision. And by the way, I do a whole talk around the legal ramifications that companies are getting ready to face when it comes to AI job loss. Because if you put a bunch of people out of work, let's face it, you might be facing a class action lawsuit. So shortly, companies will have to start thinking through their reskilling and upskilling strategies. By the way, the word reskilling and upskilling are typically commingled, but they mean something totally different. So reskilling is this whole notion of getting an entirely new skill because your job might be obsolete, while upskilling is really advancement. They're going to be looking to teams like you all to help them figure out, if we put this group out of work, are we reskilling them to a completely different part of the organization, or are we going to upskill them? They're looking for your critical thinking to help them with this. But there's also a bigger problem, and it's happening all around you. You can't even turn on the TV without hearing about AI bias and ethics and regulation. Yeah, folks, as it turns out, we released a whole bunch of AI in 2022 through ChatGPT, and oh, it wasn't really regulated. That's because we're in a new space, right? We're in a new landscape, and they're going to need really smart people to help them figure out and navigate the AI ethics policy. So again, these are all opportunities for us as Agilists, but they also need AI programmers and industry subject matter expertise. So I'm giving you a snapshot of how companies are going to be leaning in and utilizing your skills. So the next best question for Dawn Nicole is, well, Dawn, if I'm an Agile Scrum Master and a product owner, what type of skills do I have already in my wheelhouse that naturally transfer over? Like, even if I didn't have an AI certification, what is it that I'm doing today that can lend itself nicely? It might not be eye for eye the way we remember old school Agile, but here are some real relevant skills that they can use that you already have. Number one, Agile Scrum Masters and product owners, you can help ensure that AI adoption projects are broken down into manageable tasks. This is where they're going to lean into Agile or Waterfall, right? Depending on what works, right? So they're going to be looking for this know-how, this intel. But they're also going to be looking for product owners who can work with stakeholders to define the requirements of AI adoption. And when I say requirements, remember, this is a new space, which means for all of us, right? So we haven't been here yet. This is what's really exciting. Also, they're going to be looking for Scrum Masters and product owners to help facilitate communication between the development team, set expectations, all the things we do already, right? They're also going to be leaning into us to ensure the AI adoption project is delivering value and that we can help identify and manage the associated risk. And let me tell you, there are risks. There are risks when it comes to AI bias, and there are already class action lawsuits. In fact, Amazon has a great use case of a lawsuit where their machine learning and their recruiting algorithms. So to be clear, when candidates would submit their resumes, Amazon was so used to their tech teams hiring men that the machine learning algorithms are now trained to just zone in on the applications of males. Well, that's a problem. But remember, bias is created by the people who program it or by how we train the data. So the more you know in this space, my friends, right, the more in demand you will be. There's also a class action lawsuit in the pharmaceutical space, right, where there were some studies, some medical studies that were skewed because the data was skewed. There's a lot going on in this space. I don't want to go down a rabbit hole, but I want you to know some of the biggest opportunities are going to be around the risk, managing the risk, and making sure we have protocols in place. And this is where you come in. But before you come in, I should also warn all of you on this call that many of you studied, reported that you don't feel that you're being adequately trained for today's digital advances. So while you are very well skilled in project management, you probably have know-how in Agile, you probably could utilize some deeper knowledge in the AI space. And this is where the opportunity for reskilling or upskilling comes into place. And just to remind you, I've already mentioned that reskilling is about an entirely new skill in most cases, while upskilling is about advancement. So now on the very next slide, you can feel free to take a screenshot or a picture. I'm going to break down the types of skills that are needed from Agilists like you for today's world. Okay, so the first thing you're absolutely going to need is you're going to need to bring those technical skills up just a little. Now, when I say technical, let me be clear. I mean Agile technical skills. So know what you know. Understand your basic fundamentals of Agile like you know it today, regardless of your methodology. Let's not fight about which methodology. Choose one or two that you believe in, that you feel good about, or that your company is utilizing right now. Understand the technical piece, but also understand where you might have to bend some rules. We have to be Agile, you all, right? So I say that because I think we forget, and we're such purists when it comes to Agile. Don't ever change. Well, theoretically, there's a company that pays us and there's an organization. And yes, we need to understand the original framework, but we also need to understand that the world is changing. So when I say technical, understand the methodology, but also understand AI. So I would advise everyone on this call, regardless of what Agile certifications you have, go and get you a basic certification in anything AI. There's a great one that we recommend that's called AI Essentials certification, and it takes you from beginning to winning. You can scan the code on the screen, and I think PMI will later share about a great discount you get with that one. But listen, there are a lot of great AI certifications. Go and get one if you really want to compete at the highest levels this year. The second thing that you're going to need are great soft skills. And soft skills are a bit underrated, but they're important, right? Empathy, emotional intelligence, the ability to communicate well, verbally and written, but also ask the right questions. And by the way, I want to say this, I didn't have this baked into my presentation, but this is important. In 2023, the reason why ChatGPT works so well is because of this new technique called prompting. Now that sounds simple to you, but when you're asking ChatGPT the question, that's called prompting, and there are whole disciplines being built around advanced prompting. Prompting, though, is no different than you asking the right questions in real life. Okay, so the better questions you ask, the better answers you're going to get. So understanding how to ask the right questions. There's a great certification out there that's called 5 Powerful Discovery Questions leaders can ask their teams. I think it's on the screen. Feel free to scan it. But also you're going to need to understand this whole Agile mindset piece. And this really goes back to being Agile. Like you have to be before you do, right? Before you execute, you have to be in the headspace. And really that starts with embracing it. And I would encourage everyone on this call to define for yourself, what does being Agile mean for me? Like if you can define it in 3 words, like I know what it means for Dawn Nicole, and I do entire workshops to help companies figure out what that means at an organizational level. But it starts with you. If you're really going to be Agile, what is going to be your commitment? Is it moving faster with flexibility, more fluidly, right? So come up with some words that feel right for you on how to have that real Agile mindset. But you're also going to need teamwork, customer focus, leadership, all of the things that Jeff and Mike's wonderful trainings can help you with, okay? So as I'm coming to a close, and then we'll open it up for Q&A, and then we have an awesome exercise. There are 5 takeaways that I want you to get. So this is the conclusion. This is the so what of Dawn Nicole's presentation. Number 1, what I'm saying to you today is that Agile is evolving to meet the changing world around it. Okay? So Agile's not what it used to be, and let's actually be Agile. Okay? The third thing I want to tell you is it's really not about all the certifications you have if they don't produce outcomes. Your work, team, is understanding how your multiple certifications equal outcomes for your customer or your company. That's that part, right? Also, number 4, Agile professionals like all of us, we are in the absolute best position front lines of change. Number 5, Agilists who understand AI will be in demand this year and beyond. So I'm going to open it up for questions.
I've been tracking some of the questions along the way. One of the first ones was, what is the best way to get business areas also adopting Lean Agile at scale?
What are some of the best ways to get business areas adopting Lean Agile at scale? Mm-hmm. That I hear Lean Agile as a preference. I'm wondering why the person who asked the question, I would think you would have asked me how to adopt Agile at scale, whether it's Lean or Scrum. But what I would say is most companies who are making a decision to even move to Agile, there's a pain point. Identifying the pain point. So when I go in, and by the way, what I used to do is my team would put together the proposal to do the transformation. We always started at the beginning with asking, why now? What's happening? What's driving this? What are you losing out on? What are you missing out on? Are you losing customers? So I think if you can create the business case around what's happening today and then show how moving to Agile, regardless of the framework, Lean, Safe, Scrum, Kanban, can make a difference and overcome, that's the best way to start, if that makes sense to you.
Another one was, we need to bring people with us as we embrace transformation,
Yes.
meaning both internal and how we work with our customers, organizational change to be in the conversation to support the evolution of an Agile work environment for both company personnel and external partners. Have you seen any models that are working?
I do. Yes, it's funny you ask. So I don't know if Prasad remembers this, but 2 years ago, I was on this whole pioneering, this whole initiative around Agile Mindset. And Agile Mindset is more than a word, right? It's more than a terminology. There's actually work. So I do have a framework on why Agile Mindset goes first and why there's an entire exercise. And you start with the top. You get the leaders on board to say, let's start with just making sure we are an Agile organization. Like, how do we be more Agile? What does that mean to us when we say it? So there's an exercise, and I don't know who asked that question, but maybe what I can do, Katie, is send out my template. I have a great workshop one-pager template that's like an exercise that you go through with top management. You start with the leaders, then you go to secondary management, then you do it with teams, and you really get them on board drinking, I hate to say drinking the Kool-Aid, but before you execute Agile, because some of the reason it doesn't work is people go right to the doing, right? They go right to the execution, and you bypass all of the work up front, which is the mindset. What are we trying to achieve? Can we agree on what it means to be an Agile organization? What are we moving away from and moving towards? So there's a whole line of work and a great framework, and I will send that out to PMI Minnesota to socialize to you all.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So the next one is, what do you think of the prevailing operations science suggesting 100% upskill required of all skilled labor within 24-month periods? AI, machine learning rate of change making humans the biggest slack in the process and gaps in cognitive behaviors.
That was a mouthful, and I'm not looking at the screen, but that no, but it's like I need another cup of coffee. But I will tell you, so this is what I think you're getting at, and if I think you're basically alluding to the fact that there was some data or a study, which there are many of them now, saying, hey, if you're in skilled labor, you need to upskill in the next 2 years so that you're not in jeopardy. Something to that effect is where I think you're going. And if that is where you're alluding to, I would absolutely agree. And I'm not just saying it because we have an AI company, right? Because part of the work we do is we teach bias. We help to understand AI bias and ethics and how this doesn't adversely impact the world. So I actually care about people staying employed. What I will say, however, is that it's not just skilled labor that's in trouble. Like, I think when we first looked at the data, everyone thought that the skilled labor workers were the ones that were going to get replaced the fastest. Guess what? It's now the white collar jobs. It's now some of the things that we used to do, right? And so I would now, my message to everyone, regardless, is go and get an AI certification, even if it's a basic. You don't have to do it because you're going to be teaching neuroscience, right? And robotics, but you want to understand the lingo. And the moment you get that certification, whether you're in skilled labor or you work in an office, you become immediately more valuable, because even if a small mundane task that you do gets replaced, now you can oversee. Because the thing about AI, you all, is we don't have it right. Just because it's new doesn't mean it's right. Yes, it's more effective, it's faster, but it has a lot of kinks. So we're still going to need people to oversee the quality. We're still going to need people to make sure that the output of AI is predictable. So when you upskill and you have a higher certification where you can oversight the AI, those are going to be sort of the new roles of the future, is being in charge of the data and the quality that the AI produces. Next question.
That's a great lead in actually to the next question. And then
Okay.
Brent, I do see that your hand is raised, and we'll get to you following this one because it's a good follow-up.
Yeah.
Michael O'Connor asked, can you recommend an AI certification on LinkedIn? And I know you also have a lot of AI offerings as well. So maybe if you want to.
Yeah. Michael O'Connor, great question. And I think if that's the same Michael O'Connor, I think I'm speaking at. I don't know. Your name sounds familiar. So Michael O'Connor, I believe there are a lot of great ones on LinkedIn because we are Skilldora and we build our own certifications. I know about ours. I would say search LinkedIn for sure because I don't know firsthand, but I do know that the AI Essentials certification that we just rolled out is state of the art. And I just want to talk about whether you get our certification through Skilldora or any certification. Let me just share with you what you should be looking for. What does good look like? You're not necessarily looking for an AI certification to teach you coding and programming. Many of you are likely looking for a certification. So you can navigate the landscape. Like, what the heck is going on? What are these terms? How many versions of artificial intelligence are there? What's the basic, right? But beyond the basic, we also talk about AI ethics. We give you a framework for AI bias, which you're going to be asked about as project managers. You're going to be put on some of those projects. So we're teaching you everything from a beginner in the beginning of the certification, and then we get more advanced with societal impacts, which no one is teaching in their AI certifications, and ethics policies and frameworks and everyday uses of AI for any industry. That's the gold. That's what you need to know right now, at least as a starting point. So I hope that's helpful. And I think PMI is going to share again the link to the AI EC because you guys get 50% off. Sorry that I stole your thunder.
No, please.
But you get a great big discount that we're not giving to anyone else. And universities are licensing the certification. So yeah.
Great. Brent, would you like to go ahead?